Greetings. Thank you for being here. Okay, this is Female Reverence Sunday number 8. I just want to welcome you. I'm Amy. I'm your host, also known as Modern Day Sybil. And today's video, so just real quick, just a little reminder of why I named it Female Reverence. And if you look into Gematria and the link between numbers, female and reverence, female equals 9 and reverence equals 9, both in English and reversed English and all of the forms that are pretty normal in Gematria. 9 is one of my numbers. I understand how 9 is very important, and I wanted to incorporate that with words. Okay, so, and each Sunday, the reason why I mentioned this, I'm going to post this on another platform, but every Sunday on my YouTube channel as well, I go live. This one is not live, but I typically go live and do a Female Reverence Sunday in a world filled where most of the reverence is not around females or women in general. So the last couple weeks I incorporated animals because there's a saying that the best teacher is nature. And if you look into nature, you will see different animals leading and ruling their herds, tribes, pods, etc. They are predominantly female. They are all female dominated in the sense that females make the choices of their mates, and there are typically females running the show and picking the males if there are males involved. However, I wanted to go also into the matriarchal animals and then link those animals back to goddesses we may or may not know. So today it is whales, and I specifically picked the orcas. And I just on a side note say they're called killer whales also, which for the longest time as a young kid, I just assumed that they were all males. Not all males, but predominantly males. I find this kind of goes along with what happens with females in the world in general and how they become demonized or how they become masculinated. And I don't know. That was my perception. I don't know how others feel when they hear about orcas, or otherwise known as the killer whale, and what their kind of impression is at first. Okay, so the reason why I picked orcas the last couple weeks, the first one was based around elephants, the second one around eagles and snakes, and this week are whales. Whales are one of my favorite creatures on this planet. And spiritually or remembrance, they hold memory. Elephants and whales, the largest mammals on this planet, they must know stuff. I think that they do. So, in link to that, we get started with the matriarchal lineage of the orcas. So, what I've researched and found, and what many of you may or may not know, our orcas are predominantly matriarchal. They are led by the female, and even males within the pod will stay with the mothers. So, orcas, killer whales, have one of the strictest and most successful matriarchal systems in the animal world. Every pod is centered around the eldest female. This structure is called the matriline. It includes the matriarch, the grandmother, her daughters calves, her adult sons who stay with her for life. Now, I like pointing these out because if you think about nature and you think about humans and how much different things would be if we functioned as a female-centered society where females had authority and autonomy, I do theorize that many sons would not only stay with their mothers for life, and we kind of see that in some aspects, but not on a basis of survival necessarily in the ways that we see it, but on a basis of survival because of the knowledge handed down and the teachings. Okay, so males never leave their mother's side ever. This alone shatters the Western narrative that males must leave the family to be strong. Orcas show the opposite. Male strength comes from staying deeply connected to maternal guidance. Okay, the matriarch is the memory keeper. Rely on knowledge, not dominance. There are hierarchies in nature, but they're based on knowledge and remembrance more than like strength and power. That's included, but not in the way that humans interpret it. The matriarch remembers migration routes, safe passages, hunting techniques, dangerous territories, seasonal changes, and how to survive scarcity. She carries decades of memories, and this determines the pod's survival. This is why older females are considered like sacred, spiritual in Orca society. They embody ancestral knowledge similar to crone, goddess, and mother of time energies. All right, now here's something fascinating. Menopause is the key to Orca power. See, in our society, menopause, not only in the male-centered perception, but even for us as women, we hold this, it's like the importance of the mothers, the elder mothers, have been dismissed within humans, especially around menopause. Oh, you no longer can do your duty, what you were born here to do, which is to have children or to make babies. Now you're kind of considered less important. I rebuke that. Okay, only 3 beings on this planet experience menopause: humans, orcas, and pilot whales. I thought it was a different creature. Why? Because postmenopausal females become full-time leaders. They stop birthing so they can teach, guide, hold memory, and regulate pod behavior. That is radical. And that's also radical in like the word meaning cool. Orcas evolved menopause because the wisdom of older females is more valuable than producing more babies. We, as great mothers who studied nature, we knew this, especially where there were whales. Okay. This is exactly where I like to link things when I talk about the great goddesses, when I talk about the great mothers, when I talk about the ancestral indigenous melanated mothers. My personal opinion is that great mothers built what we now call the Tartarian buildings because they understood the ethers, they understood astrology, they understood the planet, they understood themselves, the body, the moon, and they linked the elements that they understood through their own knowledge and put them into buildings. And I think that those buildings were created pre-pyramid is my theory, but that is another topic we can get into another time. Anyhow, okay, so I also learned, I asked about, so we know when we go into menopause because we stop having our menses. We basically stop having our menses, our periods. Well, for the whales, they don't actually have menses into the water, they don't have their periods in the water, their wombs reabsorb that. How fascinating is that? Okay. And they know when they stop producing. Now, elephants, which are also matriarchal, they can keep having babies well into their 60s. And, elephants can live for a long time anyways, but they can, as long as they are fertile, so to speak, and it's not that anyhow, as long as they are still producing that cycle, they can have that cycle. And then, let's see, what were some other things I wanted to mention? But that is how they change, how they know that they have reached that part of their lives, or they literally stop reproducing. Whereas many other female-dominated groups will still keep producing well until their elder ages. So, okay, she decides everything. The matriarch in the pod decides everything. Where the pod goes, where they hunt, when they rest, what risks, which risks are safe. I mean, a risk, is it safe? But what risks are more likely than others, when to avoid conflict, and when to approach other pods. She decides that. She's not dominant through aggression. She leads through experience, memory, and emotional intelligence. This is true feminine leadership, or female leadership, and this is something that has also come into contention. There's this theory that if it's in nature, then we see it with humans. Well, okay, let's actually reflect that, because it's always the female, always, and especially with the orcas. Now, also the males depend on their mothers emotionally and physically. Male orcas live with their mothers their entire lives. They are fed by their mothers even as adults. Bond the closest with the matriarch. If the mother happens to unalive, adult sons experience depression, weight loss, and higher mortality. That's sad. This shows how maternal bonds create social stability, not hierarchy or competition. And I feel like you can relate this to today's world, where instead of actually looking at the system that removes the mother, removes the importance of centering the mother, the females, that this is what happens with the males in human life. This is literally showing us how nature teaches, how nature shows us what is the most beneficial. And we don't listen to it, or we've been mistaught. Female calves inherit leadership. Daughters learn by swimming beside the matriarch, watching her communicate. I'm sorry, but I just feel like this is us, just in pod form and whale form, and we are like society culturally ingrained into this other way of being. It's just, anyhow, the daughters also learn by watching her hunting methods and memorizing the routes that she teaches. Okay? And it passes mother, daughter, granddaughter. This is another form. To me, it shows like triple goddess energy with the whales. Okay, now there are matriarchies in other whales. Pilot whales, for example, they are cousins to the orcas. Pilot whales are extremely close relatives of orcas. They live in female-led pods, they experience menopause, and they value the older females as navigators. They are known to lead migrations over thousands of miles, guided by memory. Sperm whales form matriarchal clans, grandmothers, mothers, daughters, and calves. Males leave the pod temporarily, but they return frequently, and females stay together for life. The matriarch teaches communication dialects, holds migration paths, teaches healing behavior, and keeps the pod stable. Their societies evolve around deep social bonds and communal caregiving. Okay, then we have the beluga whales. They migrate in female-led herds called nurseries. What? Okay. Interesting. These herds include grandmothers, mothers, pregnant females, aunties, and babies. They communicate constantly and share caregiving responsibilities. An auntie system, similar to early human matriarchal tribes, where we were auntie. Well, and you'll still see this in some indigenous cultures where they call everyone auntie or uncle, or the elders grandma and grandpa, or pop and mama. You'll see that today. Okay, another group are the humpback whales. They're not fully matriarchal, but females lead the migration. And in my last video, if you don't know, so scientists, which I also, it's typically the colonizers who are teaching us these things, but through their spectrum, matriarchal only applies to a group or a pod rather than specifically each individual, because the eagle isn't considered matriarchal, but it's the female who picks everything. Snakes aren't considered matriarchal, but snakes, the female picks everything. There is not a creature on this planet that I have discovered yet where the female doesn't make all the choices. She picks the males. She picks who's going to be a part of the herd in horses. It's the mare, it's the queen bee, the queen ant. All right, you don't hear about the king ant or the king bee. Okay. Okay. So humpback whales are the next ones. And that's what I was saying. They're not fully matriarchal, but females lead the migration. They pass on songs. Calves learn routes exclusively from their mothers. Older females mentor the young ones. Song transmission, which is mostly female-led, is cultural inheritance, like oral tradition. That is fascinating. This is where it shows me that we paid much attention to nature. The great mothers, the great Aboriginal mothers. Orcas are the pinnacle of matriarchy. Across all whales, orcas represent the strongest example of lifelong matrilineal bonds, female-led navigation, ancestral knowledge, emotion coercion, and multi-generational survival. And that's the other thing. Emotional awareness is typically taught by the mothers. And in our society, and especially within certain cultural constructs, the female's example of emotional, it's like females are considered emotional because they cry. But males are not considered emotional because they have aggression. Those are both forms of emotion. And so you would imagine that in a pod, especially in the ocean, you're going to have to have some emotional awareness. Okay, so just a little side note. Again, I feel like we watched nature and we taught through nature, like nature. Okay, multi-generational survival as well. This is the orcas, and they are the eldest daughters of the ocean as far as that group, because they are led by the grandmothers. Okay, all right, that's that part. Now, I mentioned before the memory part, the whales holding memory. And just knowledge of the ocean, like we barely have knowledge of the ocean. And so I can only imagine would imagine this might be also why we're not allowed to talk to dolphins, because they can probably talk to the whales. I saw a video, and hopefully you all saw it as well, where a whale was giving birth and sharks started approaching, is the story, and hundreds of dolphins surrounded the whale to protect her while she was giving birth. I mean, okay, and this is how we used to do it. Like, it was, oh, those are females. It didn't matter what language we spoke, where we were from. We immediately connected with other females because of this type of awareness. We would learn from each other. We would help each other. We would share cultures and languages and food and different types of teachings. Okay? Now, those are, and then things that I consider important in the human evolution, which we may see with whales as well, which is why I already mentioned memory. That includes knowledge, intuition, ancestral intuition. Whales, their cycles are based around the moons. Their birthing cycles their birthing cycles take place around the moon, and then their mating cycles also take place around the moon, either the new or the full moon. So we see a deep connection to the moon. And you'll see this with other animals as well. I talked about the elephants, and I don't think I mentioned it, but there have been stories where the elephants do things specifically on a full moon. So there is a natural connection to the moon as well. Check out the Farmer's Almanac. Any year, most of the planting happens around a full moon. It's pretty amazing. And the moon in general, a lot of their cycles go around the moon. Okay, the female, the feminine aspects, the great mothers, the grandmothers, the mothers, the daughters, okay? The lineage of mothers to daughters. And then sound as creation, like how they use sound, how whales use sound. And they all have different sounds that they use. And it's like, penetrates the water. And if you remember in the elephant video, they have this inner sound system where they can feel very, very low vibrations hundreds of miles, or I can't remember if it's hundreds of miles, but many miles away. So if we have a majorly large land animal that can feel things vibrationally through the earth, why wouldn't the whales also be able to feel different vibrations through the water? What they know. Okay? Now, we go into the goddesses. Now, some of these goddesses I have done videos on my YouTube, and some I have not. So I have done a video on Sedna. And then I say gods and goddesses, but these are colonial words. These are religious words where I feel like this. So when I did my video around the Arawak deities, they don't call their deities or goddesses. They call them semis. And all of these beings, when we're talking about the indigenous culture, we didn't look at them as deities. They're like ancestors, and they are elements, and they are part of the earth, and sometimes part of the sky and stars, sun and moon, beyond what can be considered God. And I personally think that God is a word that was created to say something supernatural, unexplainable, or super powerful, because I think a mother in birth, or a great mother, a female that has gone through so many things, I think is a type of what we would call supernatural. Okay. So I apologize. Let's say that these, I know in the Arawak language, that's what that represents. If there are words to represent these deities in their languages and you know it, please educate me. That's what I would like. Sedna. I have done a video on Sedna. She is an Inuit great mother of the sea. She has kind of a sad story, so I'm not going to go into the story, but she is considered the great mother of the ocean, the great mother of the sea. She is connected to the Inuits, or Inuit is plural, Inuit peoples, and I actually think I'm just saying peoples twice. So this is the Arctic area and circumpolar area. The animals linked to her are whales, seals, orcas, sea mammals. Her role or her link is creation, death, rebirth, and the mother of all ocean beings. She's one of the only beings explicitly described as the origin of whales. Literally the mother of whales. Her story begins, I'm not going to get into her story, it's a bummer. So, and I often find that too in most of these great mother stories, it's kind of a bummer. So I'm not going to get into that part, but she ends up becoming a part of the sea. She was a real person, very important. Something happened with her father basically, and she ended up perishing into the ocean, where she then becomes the mother of the sea beings and apparently the whales specifically. Her fingers, because part of what happens is she loses her fingers trying to hold onto the boat, and they become whales, seals, and walruses through the story. I don't want to say mythology because that is also colonial. She is associated with the underworld of the ocean, and her energy, her hair being tangled, represents the emotional ancestral knots between humans and spirits, is one of the possibilities. I haven't found complete reference to that, but when we're talking about the Great Mother and the sea, we can consider like seaweed or anything that becomes tangled in reference, that it represents a few things. Patience, because it takes time to untangle things, and also the interweavings of the world and its connections to us and the great mothers, or many even our hair, what our hair can represent. Okay, next goddess or being of supreme elemental magic, so to speak, the Inuit Orca mother. So there's Sedna, she's the daughter, and this is Nuliak. Or Nuliak. All right, I'm probably messing that up. Trying the best to pronounce it well. She is the full sea great mother goddess, often appearing in orca form. She is said to ride on the backs of orcas, or be the orca herself. Then there is Tinaru, a Polynesian whale guardian, originally female. And this is something else I also talk about in my videos, how many deities were originally female and then it either became masculated or made to be bad. Her region is Polynesia, specifically Samoa, Tuvalu, and Fiji. And through her though she is now described as male, older versions, specifically in the Tuvalu and Samoa region, the name was a female ocean being or a feminine ocean being, keeper of whales, carrier of fertility and ocean abundance. Tinirau's home is said to be an island surrounded entirely by whales who protected her. Interesting, because we just talked about the dolphins protecting whales. Okay. And then we have Atargatis, a Syrian mermaid goddess linked to the great fish and whales. This region is Syria and Levant, sometimes called the Great Fish Mother. Her earliest forms depict her not as a mermaid, but as a massive sea creature mother, likely connected to whales more than fish. She is a goddess, semi-deity, great elemental mother of water, fertility, flood cycles, stars, and time. And then we have Yemoya, or Yemoja. So she is an Orisha of the ocean, big mother of waters, or mother of big waters. She comes from the Yoruba, they say Afro-Caribbean. My theory is that this is actually originated in the islands of the Americas and went east. That's my personal theory, because of the names like hurricane and such like that come from the semis of the Arawak peoples, and Yemoja may be one of them, or could be considered one of them. While not specifically a whale goddess, in many Caribbean traditions, she is connected to deep ocean waters, whales and dolphins, blue-black depths, tides, lunar rhythms. Some diaspora artists portray her riding a whale, especially in Brazil. She ties beautifully to, also, I consider Oya, and as I mentioned before, the semi-linked to orokans, or hurricanes. Okay, then we have Vatia, or Vari Mate Takeri, Cook Islands creation goddess. Vari is a primordial womb of all life. Her children include gods who take whale form. She's often shown with dual nature, part human, part aquatic mother. Okay, and her children include gods who take whale form, and we just discussed why we're even talking about whales, how matriarchal they are. So were they also like deities of great mothers? I'm gonna say it's a huge possibility. Then we have Kananoa, or Kanaloa, partner. This is a Hawaiian deep sea mother. Kanaloa is male, but an older chance he was a counterpart, a deep sea goddess who commands whales and great ocean spirits. Please give me confirmation if that is correct. Her name varies by island and is often not spoken. And we spoke about this before. In some indigenous traditions, names are not spoken unless they are given to certain people within the ceremony, and that is to provide and keep privacy and the spiritual importance of these semis great elemental mothers. Haina is a moon ocean mother, and Kanaloa could be related. And then Haumea is an earth sea birth mother. Okay, so there's some links there to whales. And then we have Orcanus, matriarch, Pacific Orca ancestor, first mother. This is part of some of the Pacific Northwest clans and tribes like the Haida, the Tlingit, and and Kwa Kawakwa. I know I said that wrong. Kwa Kawaka Wakwa. Forgive me for mispronouncing that. In those Pacific Northwest tribes, there is a female ancestral orca spirit who rules the ocean, guards lineages, takes women to sea. I don't like that story. Returns them as healers or shamans. Okay. That's okay. She is not always given a single name. Often she is called Our Mother Below. This also links to the highly melanated great mothers, especially the coastal mothers. Okay, I feel like all of these do. This is why I do this also. I pull up great mothers from other parts of the world because I feel, and what I've learned from doing my research, that it comes back to the Americas, and it comes back to us as those great mothers of indigenous knowledge and First Peoples. Okay, so Olokun is Olokun with a K, Olokun, West African, deep ocean sovereign, sometimes female. Olokun, I think, also can be seen in the Yoruba religions or pantheon. This being was originally female, ruler of the deep sea, associated with whale spirits, and connected with wealth, ancestry, and the abyss, which brings me back to like Tiamat, the great mothers of the waters, the deep waters. Okay, so that is my main video for tonight, which go into the whales, the matriarch, how it's connected to us when it comes to nature, and what is true about females, humans as well, being that not only are we connected to the earth and in the waters and all these creatures and to this remembrance, but how important they are in nature without human influence. Without any human influence, these groups, how connected they are, and how important the matriarch is in their survival and their knowledge, even their emotional work. Meaning, like, we do emotional work, but what I mean is emotional work that keeps the pods safe and like regulated. And then we can see what happens when the great mothers are not there. Okay. So they are also timekeepers. They also have lunar cycles, like we're told we do. It makes me question a lot as far as different theories about our planet, about this being that we live on, about the celestial beings surrounding us, because I'll hear stories about how they're not true or it's a big ball of light in the sky. But I feel like the nature on this planet also links to those cycles. Is that by design? Are they being fooled too? I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. I think there's things that we still don't know about this planet, but I do think that we have plenty of resources and natural proof of females' importance and their authority in nature that is easily respected. It's not questioned. It's appreciated. It's followed. It's honored in nature. So I feel like that's what all the work is about, is to not only remove us from the Great Mother, but in that remove us from the Great Mother, our Earth, this planet that we're on, and then ourselves as great mothers. Also to remove the true history or the true herstory of the melanated indigenous mothers. Explicitly and specifically in the Americas. Okay, so before we go, per my usual, I'm going to pull a card or maybe two from the Sacred Mothers and Goddesses deck. We'll see who we get. It was out of this deck I learned about Sedna, the great Inuit being, deity, creator, mother. Okay, so if you heard, I've been shuffling. I'm just going to pull a card out. And the card is Artemis. And I typically look at the bottom of the deck. So Artemis, independence and empowerment. Artemis, independence and empowerment. Interesting. So Artemis, if you don't know, before I got a little into Artemis around the stars and learning about Orion, because Orion was Artemis first before Orion. So she is considered a huntress, a friend to animals, and she also links to the stars. Okay, so I'm gonna read a little bit out of the book. But from what I understand about Artemis, the reason why she might be picked as independence is because she didn't need anyone else in the forest. Okay, and she is considered Greek, and she is known for the hunt and the moon. She's also linked to the moon. She is known for illuminating darkness. She shines her light on our individual paths. Known for her courageous choice to remain a virgin and hold fast to her fierce independence. Artemis is one of the most self-sufficient deities, goddesses. She lived life on her own terms, comfortable both in solitude and in community. Though she refused to marry, she relied heavily on the love of family and friends, surrounding herself with a circle of female companions. She enjoyed a fulfilling life in the mountains, accompanied by her nymphs, deer, and her adored pack of hounds. All right, that's right. Dogs or hounds are linked to her as well. Artemis's brother was born only a few days after she was born, yet she acted as her mother's doula during his birth. Thus, she is a goddess of childbirth and infants. She is associated with the protection of all animals, children and women, unmarried women especially. Artemis is not afraid to avenge injustice, and yet she is one of the most compassionate goddesses. Artemis and her brother were both excellent hunters with the bow and arrow. They respected and honored the lives of the animals as they hunted, and often avenged the lives of those unalived for the wrong reasons. Okay? So she brings confidence, empowerment. She is there for females, women, children. She is like a defender. She is very independent. She is good for bringing in within like business or the home. She is also emotionally independent. So she's aware of her emotions. That's what makes her a good hunter and a good protector. Okay, and she would be someone to bring in, if you work with the deities and goddesses, to bring in when we're looking for empowerment around being alone or being independent, and what is considered masculine in our cultural society, which is just independence and being able to take care of yourself. on a good manner. Okay, at the bottom of the deck is Green Tara, compassion and empathy. We've spoken about her before as well. Green Tara at the bottom of the deck. Interesting how they look different in each kind of reflection. Okay, her number is 11. Oh, Artemis is 2. Interesting. And Tara is 11, which would break down to 2. And so I see one as a little bit of interesting that the number 2 in the book, but it's linked to independence. You could look at it as almost like a recognition of self-love, and then gateway with Green Tara as far as 11 goes. I like to mention numbers, but also 2. Okay, Green Tara, compassion and empathy. The Buddhist goddess of compassion. She is a feminine representation of the Buddha. And I personally think Buddha is female, and the story got retold to us. And one a melanated female, and one of the 21 Taras born when the Bodhisattva, I'm not going to try to pronounce that last part. The first eternal Buddha. Okay. She is one of the 21 Taras born when the first eternal Buddha cried tears of compassion and he witnessed the suffering of humankind. Green Tara is a goddess of action, as shown by her vibrant green color, and she quickly appears when we are most in need of empathy and compassion. She is a refuge and comfort, acting to help us grow and expand into enlightenment. This is why she is known to be the savior who hears your suffering and encourages you to overcome difficulties. She is a nurturing and kind goddess who has an enlightened and interested influence on us when we seek her. Okay, empathy and compassion towards yourself, protecting your energy, giving love to self, being able to receive, finding the gifts of life, finding the gratitude of life in the sense of realistic, right? Not gaslighting the self into forgiving in a situation that may not be necessary, but forgiveness or compassion in a way that you are forgiving and compassionate towards the self, and then it expands to those around. And exactly, don't confuse empathy with codependency. Don't get so caught up in understanding others that you excuse bad behavior. Okay. And inner child and healing wounds. This might be a good one to go to in order to bring around compassion and empathy to mother wounds. All right. Ancient wounds. All right. Okay. That is my Sacred Sunday video for today, the 8th one, on the 30th of November, the last day of November. 3 and 30 being a good number, and then 9 is actually November, even though we call it the 11th month. The whole month is 9/11 because we named it November, which is 9-November. All right. So next week, I think we have one more group to share around. I think we're going to go back into, I can't remember if there's one more group of animals I wanted to bring into. kind of show. Oh, I think it's going to be lions. I think lions are next because that's another group. Probably lions and horses because those are both groups that get linked to masculinity and males. And then I'll be able to bring in goddesses that are linked to them as well, like horse goddesses and lion goddesses like Sekhmet. All right, a little bit of sound before we go. And if you made it this long, thank you for listening. And I use the sound at the beginning and the end, just bringing in some natural sound vibration and knowing the healing of sound.